Well, good morning. How are you all today? Welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I'm Steve Smith. Let's talk a little bit about martial law, living under it, surviving it, dealing with it, things like that. Okay. Grab yourself whatever you drink, hopefully out of a Stonemont mug because it all tastes better out of that. If you don't know how to get them, go to our website. They're all there. And I want to make one big announcement before we get into martial law. And I'll say this: why am I talking about martial law? Because it's on the minds of a lot of people. It is a I think a possibility, depending on what happens with the election. It might approach a probability, but in any case, you need to have some. You need to think about how to handle it. I have lived under, and most people haven't. I get a lot of comments on here from people who obviously haven't because they make some big claims. But I have lived under martial law, not the most drastic, but under a degree of it. And when I was in law enforcement, I won't say that I was ever part of the application of martial law against anyone, but I was a part of, shall we say, the control continuum. Okay, uh, how we dealt with uh, the necessity of controlling uh, large groups of people. Okay. Before we get to that, I want to let you know we got our big shipment of the new books in. The Stonemont series just got them in yesterday, so I'll be filling a lot of the orders that have been waiting online and spending my day doing that, signing the books and sending them out. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, I'll talk about it, how to get them later. It's the Stonemont series, my series on the complete guide to preparing for, surviving, and rebuilding after a complete collapse of everything. It's the reversion, the revival, the renewal, an appeal to heaven, the blessings of freedom, hostages to fortune, and the latest one, the new one that is just blowing up everywhere, on wings like eagles. That's the seventh of the Stonemont series. Since I went ahead and talked about all that already, I may as well tell you how to get them. You can get them on Amazon, and they've been setting a lot of records here the last month or so, and that's great. You can get them through Amazon. That link I put down below in the information box, or you can get them directly from me through our website, stonemont.us. Stonemont.us. That link is also down below, and if you get them there, I get to sign them for you, and then write a little note in there for you and everything like that. And we have a special on the website. Uh, that if it's a one-click option, you can buy the whole set. And when you do that, we also throw in the Stonemont notebook, and we have a nice discount when you do that. You get the whole set and the notebook and a nice discount, and I get to sign them and write a note to you and all of that. So if you would like that, I suggest, if you haven't read them yet, you have to. The link is down below, stonemont.us. You can also get all the mugs and everything, t-shirts. Okay, let's get to martial law. Well, whenever I make certain types of videos, let me use as a specific example. The one that I did is last week sometime, where I put on the video, or I mentioned the video, and I think I put the video on the Patreon side. Um, about the Minneapolis police, and this was back during the lockdowns, when they were walking down the street screaming at people to get inside their houses, right? And it was a video. Most of you have seen the video, I'm sure. And there were some people, filming, videotaping, probably with their phones. Uh, these law enforcement going down. These people were standing on their own porch, and the law enforcement was screaming at them, "Get inside your house! Get inside! Get inside!" And when they weren't getting inside, they were standing on their own doorstep. Uh, Somebody in the police, group yells, "Light them up!" And they start shooting paintballs, pepper balls, whatever at them. And whenever we talk about things like that, I'll always get a couple of comments from people that say, "Well, if paintball comes towards me, lead's going to go back at them." Okay, that is a ridiculous, ignorant comment. Okay, and I'm saying that if you're the one who said it and you hear this, it's not my intent to insult you. It's my intent to inform you and hopefully share some information that might adjust your attitude just a little bit. Okay. And if you read those comments, and I'll probably leave them up. If some people will come on and talk, I'm gonna, they'll have a fight on their hands if they come to me, and they'll have blah blah blah. Don't be fooled by the people that talk like that. Most of the time, people who talk like that aren't going to do anything. Big talkers rarely do anything. Sometimes they do, but not usually. The person who's going to do something doesn't talk about it. Here's what's going to happen. Let me explain this. Should I do that or should I back? Well, yeah, I'll go ahead and explain that, and then I'll go back and cover some of my own experiences and tell you how to deal with this. Okay? For the guy who says, if paintball comes towards me, lead's going to come back at them. Okay, they're going to kill you. Simple as that. They're going to kill you. You're going to die. You're dead. Your big talk is not going to be forgotten. Your big talk is going to be what kills you or the actions if you take it, and you probably won't. I mean, the guy that said he won't do it, but they will kill you because what do you think they're going to do? Oh, he's shooting at us. Let's go home. He's not going to stand for it. He's standing up for his rights, right? Okay, I guess we better leave. Let's go to another. No, no, they don't do that. The powers don't do that. If you stand up and aggressively resist, uh, you're going to be hammered. Simple as that. Now you decide whether you want that to be your life, your future, or not. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I am going to give some advice here to everybody who can think more clearly. Okay, so now let me go back to when I was 14 years old. I've mentioned this many times because it was a major time in my life that I learned a lot, and I mentioned it before because it applies to the times in which we currently live. As 1968, I was 14 years old. It was the summer of the riots. DNC convention in Chicago. We're getting a replay of that. By the way, I started out the day today very early, watching some of the national news, and they were showing the preparations uh, for the protests, and that we will see them devolve into burning and things at night. But during the day, they show all the parks and all the megaphones lined up and all the signs ready for the people to come and and all the college students to jump up and down about whatever their particular grievance is. Right now it tends to be pro-Palestinian. These are useful idiots being used by the powers behind them, but that doesn't matter. So it'll be interesting to see, and I know that the Chicago police and whoever else, they're gearing up. They have already decided what they're going to allow to happen. Okay, and those decisions aren't being made by the guys on the street. It's not when you see the protesters coming against the police. The police have already been told what they can do, can't do, whatever, and a lot of them will not agree with what they've been told, but they're going to do it anyway for the paycheck, the pension, and because they believe in what they're doing. Okay, simple as that. So we must accept that. During 1968, riots all over across the country, and it came about a number of things came together. Um, the protests against the Vietnam War, race riots all across the country. And when they imposed, now at that time, I lived in an area of Kansas City. I spent that summer, I should say. I lived on the Kansas side, but I spent that summer living at my grandparents' house in Missouri because I had the hots for a little blonde that lived down the block from them. So I stayed all I could over there. And where I lived was kind of the dividing line between the black areas and the white areas. So that's where the flashpoints are. Okay. And there was a lot of flash, but and I learned a lot. But I remember when the National Guard came in and they put a curfew, martial law. Okay. Now, martial law goes from, there's a spectrum of martial law. It can go from soft, simply a curfew to a lot, to very, very hard, very hard. That's what people need to understand. So it was a curfew, and I believe it was something like, I don't know, a certain age you couldn't be out after 5 or something, and then, adults, they could be out till 7 or 8, something like that. I don't know what it was. I don't remember. But I do the National Guard came in, they set up roadblocks. Um, they were patrolling in jeeps. They were manning the roadblocks. The police were, um, aggressive when sometimes, and sometimes controlling. A lot of the city burned, and it was very interesting. You couldn't buy gasoline in a container because everybody's making, not everybody, but the wrong people were making Molotov cocktails with gasoline, right? And so everybody's grass was high, and all that. So at first it was very, very, very strange situation. But then you start to, we were 14, we weren't going to stay in a house, right? Uh, you start to get used to it, and you say, okay, how can I do what I want to do and not get in trouble for it? Okay. This also applies because as we talk about, and I've talked before about living under oppression, and it's your choice whether you want to stand up and become a martyr or whether you want to find a way to live within the constraints, continue to be able to do what you want to do, and then work in other ways and just kind of let this pass over you. You know, I kind of like the lockdowns in back during several years ago, and wearing masks and people like that. People got upset about. I'm not wearing a mask, and I've heard many of the comments on here. I understand you. First off, I want you to know that I understand you completely. I'll get back to that in a second, though, because I'm going to give some advice. So, after a little while, after things kind of, we saw the new normal. uh, we would go up to or down to where we had to go, and we start uh, find where the National Guard guys were standing, post at some of the intersections. We go down during the day and just talk to them, and most of them didn't want to be there. Most of them were in the Guard because they didn't want to go to Vietnam, and they were just guys. They were guys with jobs, but once a month they did their weekend at the Guard, and 2 weeks during the summertime, and they weren't really an oppressive force. Now, one could argue that our police have become militarized to the point that they have become, in many cases, a potential oppressive force, and I won't argue against that. I've always been against the militarization of the police, and I talked about that many years before I had a YouTube channel. I was very much against that. The police, law enforcement is supposed to be people of the community trying to serve their community. They're not supposed to be military, and they don't need all this stuff on them, to properly, function as a law enforcement or a peace officer. You know, we didn't dress up like Delta to do our jobs, and most of these guys don't have to either. When we had a, we wore slacks with a crease in them, a shirt, a tie during the wintertime when we wore long sleeves, a six gun, a revolver, and a couple of dump pouches with extra ammo, some cuffs, and a radio. That was it. We were of the the community, and most of us felt that we were there to serve the community. It's changed now. Um, we all lived in the cities that we served. Um, Many times now, guys in law enforcement, they do not live in the city where they work, and that I think it was by design, and that removes the feeling of community, and it introduces an adversarial relationship between the police and the public, that they are here doing a job, keeping an eye on, and keeping people under control. And whether they think that or not, and I don't think a lot. There's a lot of good ones. I don't want to paint everybody with the same brush. There's a lot of good ones, and I know a lot of good ones. But there are also some that have taken to the authority a little bit too much. Well, let's get back to the us getting to know the National Guard guys at the blockades. And we'd go up there and we'd chat with them, and we'd smoke with them and joke with them and stuff like that, and got to know their names and where they were from, and all sorts of just joking with them. And so the result was that if they were out there after dark, we could walk up there and just we kind of had our our free range. That they weren't going to shoot us, okay? And we weren't burning things down, but we were able to go about our business. And we'd stop by and have a cigarette with them, and they'd say, "Hey, man, you guys aren't supposed to be out this late." And we'd go, I know, man. Are you gonna turn us in? You gonna? They'd say, "Oh, screw that," and we'd horse around with them a little bit. Now, we didn't push it. We weren't throwing Molotov cocktails, but we were able to function under that martial control. Okay, and if we wanted to go to down the block, we wanted whatever we wanted to do. It really it didn't um, it didn't keep us from doing most of the things we'd already been doing, always been doing. You know, now we didn't necessarily walk down the streets in large groups, late at night. It's just a matter of being smart. We hung around. We did the things we wanted to. And that's kind of a lesson there. My dad, during the time, he told me that he sold insurance, so he was, and they would restrict people. If you recall, during this last lockdown, they were talking about, and that's the COVID lockdown. By the way, I'm almost over COVID. This is the first day that I felt like I'm worth shooting, um, and now my son has it. But excuse me. But if you remember the lockdowns, they were for COVID. They were talking about when they were shutting down all the businesses and they were going to restrict uh, travel, right? And they were starting to talk about issuing permits to certain, ambulance people, first responders, things like that. That they said you're going to get a permit to show that you have a right to be out and about. Well, now most people thought, well, what the heck is that? That's East Germany stuff. That's Soviet stuff. You need a pass to travel. And so we recognize that, but a lot of people thought that was kind of cool. You have to understand this. A lot of people thought, oh, that's kind of cool. And I even had people who were in who were first responders uh, talking to me about, yeah, they're going to give us special passes so that we can drive around when nobody else can. Realize that that's a kind of personality that's out there. Well, back in 1968, my dad told me, he says, yeah, whenever he wanted to go someplace in town, he would take the card because he had, that's back before computers. He'd have a 3x5 card on all of his customers, and he'd just find somebody that he knew lived in the area where he wanted to go, and he'd put that card in his pocket. So if he was stopped by the police, he'd just say, "Well, I'm going to see my client here, my customer about some insurance, and here's their card, and here's their address," and they'd look at it and go, "Okay, Mr. Smith, well, you be careful now." He'd be on his way. And if he wanted to just drive, several places around town, he'd just find cards of people who lived in those parts of town. That's a way of getting. My dad taught me to be smart, not to be stupid. I learned to stand up for what's right, but you do it as in a smart way, not in a way that you just stand up. I'm going to fight the system. I'm standing for what's right. Well, you can stand and die for what's right if you think that's what's right, but ask yourself what good that does. Okay, just like the guy who says he's going to stand on his porch, and if paintballs come towards him, he's going to uh, lead's going back at them. Okay, so they kill you, and now what good did that serve? uh, Now what about your wife and your kids? Because dad was an idiot, dad's not here anymore. And now you've got a woman and children without a father. A woman without a husband, children without a father. You see, that's just idiocy. The person who really wants to make things work, and this is where it comes out to uh, Preparedness is you learn workarounds. That's what preparedness is about. How do we deal positively with negative situations, right? And so you figure, how are you going to do this? Now, I finally, as many of you know, I worked in a hospital during that last lockdown, and I finally lost my job because, and I stood up against things that I was told to do that I knew were wrong, and I said, I'm not going to do it. And many other people did too. Uh, but I finally lost my job because I wouldn't take the poke. And so did Kelly, my wife. And we also would not submit to testing. See, so when it gets to that point, you have to determine what's right for you. What's the point that you won't budge anymore? Okay. And there is a point, and that was ours. That was our line. No, I'm not going to do that. Well, you're going to lose your job. Okay, whatever. And this is why they didn't realize that I made more money doing other things than I did with the job. And that's why you want, you know, a variety of income streams. And our life became better after we lost our jobs anyway. But you have to think about, now up to that point, I heard a lot of people talking about, and I hear the comments here. I'm not going to wear a mask. No mask for me. No mask. Okay, think about what happens here. Think about it. Now. Did I wear a mask when I went places? Yeah, I did. You know why? Because I don't need the hassle. Okay, if I want to go in a grocery store and they want me to wear a mask, uh, okay, either I can put on my mask, go in the grocery store, get what I want, and go home and live my life. And some people will say, "But you're just giving in. You're just giving." No, here I'll tell you what I'm doing. Or I can not put on my mask, and when the people say, "Sir, you need to put on a mask," I'm not putting on a mask. Uh, and I go to try to get my beanie weenies, and stuff, and then they call the manager, and the manager comes, "Sir, you need to put on your mask." Uh, Not putting on my mask because I know my rights and blah blah blah, right? Because I'm standing up for what's right. And then you get at the checkout. Well, sir, we're not going to check you out. Well, you have to check me out because that's my right to get my beanie weenies. And well, sir, you're going to either have to leave. We're not going to check you out uh, until you put on a mask. You see, they can do this. Realize this. Just work your way through this, or you'll have to leave. I'm not leaving, and I'm just going to take my beanie weenies. In which case, they'll call the police, and you just stole something. You're going to get arrested. Or in which case, you can keep causing a problem, and they will call the police, and the police will come, and they'll talk about it, and you might get arrested, and get a free ride down to the pokey until you bond yourself out. Now, what exactly have you accomplished there, except to cost yourself a lot of time, which I don't want to waste time on stupidity, okay, and money, and spending a few hours in jail till you bond out, and then having to go to court, and then having to pay uh, a fine. Take your pick. Do you see? Living in any negative situation, ask anybody who has lived in a police state. Um, and we might think we have, but we haven't. And I've talked some stories about Northern Ireland. You want to, and that's not a police state like East Germany was or the Soviet Union, but it's a lot more than we live under here. We are not under the oppression that a lot of people seem to think they are. But it could get to that point, and so that's why I'm giving this advice. You need to think about this. Okay. Um, so the ones who have lived under oppression have find ways to continue to live good lives, and I mean it, good lives. Um, when I was in Belfast, when I was in Derry, when I was in the north of Ireland, what people call Northern Ireland, I had a great time. I mean, I was with the group that was always under the surveillance and under the gun of the state, right? But they had great lives with each other. Yeah. Well, I won't talk about it, but it was a great life. But you always had to be careful about your behavior, what you did, where you went, what you did where people could see what you said, all of these things. You were careful because you wanted to continue to live as good a life as you could. And as a result of many different things, life in Northern Ireland is much better now because it by its own weight, it tends to collapse. Okay. So you can make your decision, but what you want to realize is that standing up directly against martial law or government force, you are going to lose immediately. Now, and some will come on here and say, "You're just a government show. You don't want people to stand up." And our founders stood up, or else we wouldn't have this country, and blah blah blah. And I would say, well, you know what? Some stood up and got shot. The ones who really built this country were the ones who worked behind the scenes. You realize that they worked behind the scenes and developed all those things you need, those support systems, to be able to live essentially an alternative life under an oppressive force. Okay? Well, they stood up at Concord. They stood up at Lexington. Yeah, they did. A few common men stood up at Lexington and Concord and then other places. They were not the ones who established this country. The ones who established this country. Well, but the signers of the Declaration, they stood. Yes, and one of my ancestors was a signer. Okay, Arthur Middleton. A matter of fact, I think I talk about him in my books. There is a time to stand up, but you stand up when it can have the right effect. Not You don't throw your life away. You don't throw your time away by being arrested. You don't throw your money away by being arrested. You find ways to work around it. Now, what I would suggest is think about what you are going to do if and when martial law is imposed on your area. And usually it's not going to be, countrywide, but who knows? I mean, camel of a camel, they're going to try to take guns. We'll talk about that another time. But you find out, you think about how you want to respond. What's it worth to you? And it's when you make yourself a target, you're going to be a target. Much better not to make yourself a target and to be able to continue to live a good life and work if you want to in the background to kind of make this all go away. Because it does. It goes in ebbs and flows. Um, and I know somebody will come on. It's getting worse all the time. It's getting worse. Yes, I realize that, but it's not all getting worse all the time, and that's what you have to understand. And I keep telling the 2A people, and I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. I said, if you look at gun rights now compared to the '60s, '70s, even the '80s, we have much more gun rights. Rights come from God. Yes, I know. But the laws have changed more in our favor since then, much more in our favor since then. You see, not everything is getting worse. It looks like things are going to hell in a handbasket, and many are, but there's always ways to deal with it. That's what I want to say. And standing up against martial law, if you want to be the guy in Tiananmen Square standing out there in front of a tank with your fist up, um, be my guest. You know what happened to him, right? You know what happened to him. Nothing happens when the cameras are on. Okay? You look what happens to those people who cause a lot of noise publicly or a lot of resistance publicly. Resistance is not something that should be done for the most part. For the most, there are times when resistance it reaches a finally it reaches a point to where it can sustain and defend itself. But in the early stages, it doesn't. Resistance has to be on the down low. And if you sacrifice your life or your time or your money for no good purpose, I was going to ask what purpose does that serve, but I already answered it. No, no, no good purpose. Because if you do it, it's not going to inspire your neighbor. Okay, they they come down the block and you get out on your step and they tell you to get inside and you don't get inside and they shoot you with pepper balls and so you shoot back at them and they kill you. Guess what? That does not inspire your neighbor across the street to do the same thing, right? Okay. So a little bit of intelligence, a little bit of common sense needs to be at play here. So anyway, think about: do you have everything that you need? If there's a lockdown, you know everything you need, right? Food, water, defense, all these kinds of things. Defense in case somebody breaks into your house. Now, if the police break into your house, should you fight back? That's a whole different topic. And my answer is going to be 99% of the time, no. Unless they are actually trying to kill you. And I'll tell a story about something that happened right in this area with our sheriff department. When they raided a house. Maybe I'll do that on the Patreon channel. By the way, if you're not with us on the Patreon channel, the link is right down below. You ought to come over and join us. You'd like it. There's a lot. I put a lot more over there than I do on here, and we have a great community of people over there. Very smart folks who also leave a lot of comments. You don't get silly comments on Patreon like you do on YouTube. Nothing against 95% of you on YouTube. It's just the other 5% that tend to put in the trash. That's why I keep a lot of stuff just on Patreon. So think about what you're going to do. Work around it. Understand that you can live under most degrees of martial law, and you can do so very well. And you have to decide which way you want to go. You know, you want to be a martyr or you want to continue to support your family. And here again, somebody's going to come on and say, "Well, that's a selfish way to do it. I can't believe that you're such a sellout that you wouldn't allow yourself to be killed." Fight again another day. The fight goes on. The fight is continuous, right? You have to be a part of it. Okay. Uh, so think about that because it very possibly could be coming. What's happening in Chicago, the DNC. It's going to tell us a lot, and then it's going to tell this. The real danger comes at the election time. If well, I'll get into that more probably on the American Reversion channel. But we're in for some interesting times. So think about that. And before I let you go, just to remind you again, if you haven't read them, and you will want to, the Stonemont series, the Reversion, the Revival, the Renewal, and Appeal to Heaven, the Blessings of Freedom, Hostages to Fortune, and the latest one on Wings Like Eagles. Get them on Amazon. On Amazon, you can get them either in paperback or Kindle or Audible. You can't get them from me on Kindle or Audible, but you can get the paperbacks and you can get them signed by me and a little note written in there. And I love doing that. That's my favorite way for y'all to buy books because I love sitting down and seeing who the person was. I actually get to know the names. I recognize names. And some people will put in a little note. I've been watching you for a long time. I didn't know you were the guy that wrote these books. Yep, that's me. And so I love it when you get it through the website, stonemont.us. Remember, when you buy the whole set, one click, you get a nice discount, and you get the Stonemont notebook. Throw it in, and you will like it. You'll learn a lot, but you'll love the story. Okay, y'all, have a good day. Think about this. Think about what you're going to do. Predetermine, what your line is, and whether you're ready. Stock up. Get ready because um, when it comes, it could come fairly quickly. It could come as a surprise. It could come slowly. It could come fast. You want to be ready either way. So you all have a good day. Remember that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. and I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.